everybody. It's good to hear it. It's good to hear it. We've been on quite a journey this week, haven't we? We've been learning about how God, our good shepherd, is in control. We've been learning about how he leads us and guides us, how he never leaves us, especially when we're walking through the shadowiest shadow places of our lives. It's comforting to know that he will always be our protector. But here's the deal. Today, we're going to take a little break from the sheep talk, and we're going to see David describe our good shepherd in a different way. Instead of talking about him as the good shepherd, David today is going to talk about God as the good host. And he has prepared a feast in your honor. And this is how the psalm begins. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies, says Psalm 23:5. Here's what's really great about this. I love a good feast. In fact, I love food. I love to eat. I love everything about food. I love the smell of your house when food is cooking. I love preparing a food, presenting food. I love people coming and eating my food. I love the food coma that everybody gets in after they eat really good food and they go, oh, I'm so full, I can't eat another bite. But they somehow magically have room for dessert because there is always room for dessert. Ice cream for the win. All the time. I love everything about the whole experience that is food. I wouldn't call myself a foodie because I don't post my food on social media, but I love going to restaurants and trying new food and new experiences from different cultures and how they eat food. It's really, really good, and it's really, really difficult for me because my wife is from the Midwest, and she has what we affectionately refer to as Midwest mouth. Not too salty, not too savory, not too spicy, covered in cheese. If it isn't in nugget form, if it wasn't made by Kraft, if it isn't swimming in ketchup or ranch, then it isn't happening. That's true, it's true. Oh, save your booze, it's gross. So, all the Midwesterners are like, yes, Lord, bring me some more ranch. All right, I hear you. The Lord has heard your prayers and he's declined it. All right. It's gross. It's so gross. But you can learn a lot from different cultures solely by the foods they eat and the way that they gather around a table. You get a glimpse into their values and their beliefs and their hospitality when it is on display for you. Their food selections tell you something about what is plentiful and what is scarce when it comes to food in their region. And most importantly, when you've been invited to sit at their table, it says something about how they honor their guests. And it's not just me who shares this value. We all share this value. Think about all of the major holidays that you celebrate in a year. Thanksgiving, best holiday ever, Christmas, national holidays, birthdays. Almost all of those events center around people coming to your home as guests or you going to someone's house as a guest in their home and eating food at a table, sharing food together. To invite someone into your home is to invite them into the most sacred space in your life. And it is to treat them with the same respect that you would treat family members. Now this means that whatever hostilities or disagreements that you have had, they stop at the front door in the name of fellowship and in the name of community. And it means that you assume the responsibility of taking care of that guest while they are in your most sacred space, while they're in your home. In every culture in the world, every culture has some variation of that kind of hospitality extended to honored guests. And ancient Jewish culture is no different. In fact, they would use this substance called anointing oils to commemorate important moments, which is why David says on the second half of Psalm 23, you anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Now, anoint is a really fancy word for smearing or rubbing. It is made literally with olive oil, okay? That's what it is, mixed with other fragrances or spices. And this oil was used to do a lot of things. It was used to bless kings. It was used at ceremonies with high priests. And, interestingly enough, it was used to show hospitality toward a guest. And here in Psalm 23:5, we see our great shepherd honoring us as a special guest at the table. God doesn't just want to be our protector, and he doesn't just want to be our provider. He wants to be in a relationship with us and us with him. And not only that, but he prepares a table in the presence of our enemies, which is a really flowery way of saying that he wants to declare to the world that we are his sheep, the flock under his care. But here's the thing. How do you know that you for sure have an invitation to the table that the Lord is preparing? It's obvious that David has an invitation because he's the king and he was anointed and appointed by God. So it's obvious. And when he's talking in Psalm 23:5, he's talking about himself. You have prepared a table for me, anointed my head, got me prepared for this special moment. It's obvious he gets an invitation because he's the king. You know what would be easier for God? This is what would be easier for God. Instead of running around trying to find a bunch of sheep who don't even know that they're lost, sheep who don't even know that they're in danger, sheep who would rather live in the shadowlands than be in the protection of the flock, instead of running around trying to find all those sheep, it would just be easier for him to stick with the sheep that get it. The sheep that understand the need to be together in a flock, the sheep that understand the need for a shepherd. That would be easier. So what makes you special? What makes you get an invitation to the table? Today I want to tell you 3 very quick stories that we find in the New Testament because Jesus helped clearly define for people during his entire life and ministry, clearly the kinds of people who have been extended an invitation to the table. And I want to tell you these stories to see if you can get a better understanding of who God has invited to the table and see if you resonate with any of these groups. The first story is about a tax collector named Zacchaeus. And I don't know if you have picked up in the Bible, tax collectors are like the worst kind of people. They're not very well liked. They weren't liked in Jesus' time. They're not really liked today. Sorry, H&R Block. They're not really liked folks. And most of this hatred went beyond the fact that they collected taxes, which was their job. These guys tended to be shady. They tended to collect more than was needed so that they could pad their pockets. Tax collectors were proud, they were rich, they were powerful men, usually at the expense of poor people. So you see Jesus using tax collector frequently as examples of someone who's kind of universally hated. And Jesus is passing through a town called Jericho. Zacchaeus wants to see him, but Zacchaeus is a short man, so he's having a hard time seeing over the crowds. So he climbs up into a sycamore tree. Who's singing the song right now? He climbs up in a sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. All right, good job, preschool leaders. It's great. Lord he wanted to see. And as Jesus passes under the tree, he looks up and he says, Zacchaeus, I need you to come down because I must go to your house today. I must be a guest in your home today. And Zacchaeus was ecstatic about this, to have Jesus as an honored guest in his home. But the rest of Jericho, less than thrilled about it. And here come the mumblings. And all the people were like, did you just see what happened? Jesus is about to go to Zacchaeus' house. Can you believe that? Zacchaeus, he's about to eat with a sinner. What? And she's like, ooh, spill the tea, girl. What's this about? What's this about? You're going to eat with a sinner? But Zacchaeus has this real come to Jesus moment, and he says, look, I offer to give away half of what I have taken, owned, and give back to the poor, and anyone that I have cheated, I'm going to pay back fourfold. And this is what Jesus says to him in response. He said, today, salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. So who is the first person who receives an invitation to the table? Sinners. And how on earth did they get an invitation to the table? They were sought out by God himself. They were sought out by God himself. And in Zacchaeus' case, he was willing to give up everything that he held dear just to have the one thing that he couldn't live without. Are you? The next story is about a blind beggar who receives his sight. Jesus is approaching Jericho. He comes across a blind man on the street. There was a large crowd of people there, right? So the blind man had to shout for Jesus to heal him. But those who were with Jesus were telling the blind man to shut up because Jesus doesn't have time for that. So the man shouted even louder a second time, and he said, Son of David, have mercy on me. Wait a minute, David? Son of David? Same David? Psalm 23 David? Interesting connection, but that's what he said. Son of David, have mercy on me. You see, the blind beggar knew or believed that Jesus had the power to heal people from their infirmities, so Jesus healed him, saying, your faith has healed you. Which leads me to the next group of people who receive an invitation to the table, the least of these. That is a big overarching word that encompasses people like the poor and the sick and the orphan and the widow and the homeless and the downtrodden. And how on earth did those people receive an invitation? They had nothing to lose, so they said yes. They accepted the invitation. They believed that Jesus is the good shepherd who loves his sheep. What is it that you have to lose by accepting the invitation? The third story is about the parable of a Pharisee and a tax collector. A parable is a story that Jesus tells that makes a kind of a bigger point or idea about his plan and his purposes for all of humanity. And in Luke's gospel, Jesus comes for Pharisees pretty hard, like a lot. He sees them as these religious types that are very proud of how obedient they are and very proud at the expense of caring for other people. So in this parable, the Pharisee is praying for himself, and he is reminding God and everyone within earshot how amazing and wonderful he is, because the Pharisee believes that he is accepted by God because of the things that he has done. And in contrast, this tax collector, who we already know is the worst person on planet Earth, humbly comes before the Lord, beating his chest, begging for mercy. And what is Jesus' response? This is what he says. I tell you that this man, rather than the other one, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Being humble doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means not thinking of yourself at all. At all. This means that being religious and following the rules isn't enough to get you into the kingdom of heaven, because if it was, you wouldn't need a good shepherd. You could do it on your own. Taking pride in your worldly accomplishments and then presenting them to Christ like this should be enough to get my invitation as evidence, as if you need that, it's not going to be enough. It's not enough. So who is the last group of people to receive an invitation? It's not the Pharisee, it's the undesirables. The undesirables, you know, the bullies, the cheats, the liars, the thieves, the people that did nothing to deserve being there get an invitation. And how on earth did those people get an invitation? Simple, they changed their posture. They changed their posture. Here's the interesting thing about all three of these groups of people. This is all of us. This is all of us. All of us are sinners. Okay, and we certainly have all been undesirables at some point in our lives, and many of us know what it is like to be the least of these in our community. The invitation to the Lord's table is for all of us. And when you think about how we got our invitation to the table, however you received your invitation to the table, when you put all of them together, it literally tells the story of the good shepherd and the lost sheep. We were sought out by God himself. We accepted because what do we have to lose? And then we changed our posture. That's the story. That's the story. I was talking to a parent once who was really lamenting about their son's behavior in school, and he was in a lot of trouble. And in the middle of this conversation, she stopped abruptly and she said, you know, I know that the world sees my son as messed up and so distracting in school and all of these things, and that he's good for nothing and he can't seem to get it together. But when I look at him, all I see is my son. And then she said to me, does that make sense? And I said, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Because you see your son the way the rest of the world doesn't. Because you love your son the way the rest of the world doesn't. You love him unconditionally, which means without expectation, without condition. You love your son. At the end of Psalm 23:5, we see David saying these simple words, my cup overflows, it overflows. And what he's saying here is that God is such a generous host. He's so good that David finds everything he needs at the Lord's house. So today, when we think about purpose, oftentimes we think about it in worldly terms. What am I going to be when I grow up? What does God want to do? How do I get out of this mess? What was I made for? And when Jesus sees you, all he sees are his sons and his daughters. And all he wants from you is to just sit at his table, come to his house, sit at his table, enjoy the feast that's been prepared for you. That's your purpose. That's it. To be the sheep and for him to be the shepherd, for us to be in eternal relationship with each other all the time. And everything else is blessing. Consider it an overflowing cup. What do I be when I grow up? What am I going to do? How is God going to use me? However he does it, whatever you end up doing, whatever the calling is, as long as you're in relationship sitting at the table with God, it's good. You are fulfilling your purpose as long as that never changes. Ever. So the only question to ask yourself today is simply this. Jesus welcomes all of us to his table. Are you coming? Are you coming? I expect to see all of you at the table and the feast that's been prepared for us. No matter where God sends you from this moment forward, no matter what you do, how you act, I expect to see you there. Because it's literally why you have been created. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, thank you so much